Hello everyone, we're keeping fairly well. It's BlackShadow here, and welcome to the second part of this mini-series that I'm doing on the Ix Immortality meta for Dune Imperium. In the first video of this, I talked about the whole rush around getting hold of the Swordmaster, why people want to do it, the uses, how to get there, how to try to block it, that sort of thing. But now we're going to start looking at a couple of leaders in the game in particular. I will be doing a video on Tessia Vernius, who's been viewed as a very, very strong leader since her incorporation to the game with the Rise of Ix expansion. But first, we want to have a look at Count Ilban, who has had a very, very interesting journey. Ilban's been around since the early days. He was part of the original 8 leaders for Dune Imperium when it came out 3 years ago. And his journey across the expansions has been very, very curious. And now with Ix Immo, he is viewed by some players as a very, very powerful leader. And definitely there's a lot of potential to do a lot of damage. Now, for those of you that watched my tier listing of leaders that I did a couple months ago, may recall that I didn't actually put Ilban at the very top of the chain. I put him as a very decent A rank, kind of veering towards the S class, but didn't quite put him up there with that set of leaders. And I explain my reasoning for the time. While I do think he can be incredibly powerful, that there are a couple of issues which can become relevant. And I'm going to bring up some of those in this video, because we're going to talk about why Ilban is seen to be very powerful, what strengths he can bring to the table, and also ways to kind of get around that. I still kind of stand by my listing for that. Obviously, Ilban has had some varying strengths on other tier listings, but I think the less about that, the better. That horse has definitely long since bolted, and I imagine he's changed his mind since. So first things first, let's remind ourselves of what Count Ilban's strengths are. Every leader has an ability with their rank card, and also a passive that they can activate whenever it is applicable in the game state. Count Ilban's ring allows him to just generate a Solari for nothing, just happens on the spot. And the main thing for Ilban is his Ruthless Negotiate ability. Whenever you pay Solari for a board space, you can draw a card, which on the face of it doesn't seem too bad. You know, it's a bonus. You're not getting any necessary discounts on the space, but the manufacturing, the idea of that is to kind of supplement that difference. Now, Ilban's effectiveness has changed a lot since the first edition's Dune Imperium hit stores some 3 years ago. So we're going to go back in time here. We're going to go back to a world that many of us don't really remember anymore, and that is the base Dune Imperium board. It looks bizarre to look at nowadays, but is always interesting for some retroness. So Count Ilban was not the best regarded of the 8 original leaders in the game. And the reason for that is because his manufacturing ability is nice, but what are you actually doing with the Solari? Obviously, you're looking at spaces where there's more spaces where you pay for money to get the card draw. Well, you've got the board. Unfortunately, there's not many. In fact, there's only 4 in the entire game, and 2 of them you can only go to once. So realistically, you've got Mentat and you've got the Rally Troop space, which is you pay 4 Solari to get 4 troops, and they would usually go into your garrison unless you had like rapid mobilization to deploy them. Which in itself actually was not a bad little space. I kind of liked it. Obviously, it was a bit slow, but it's about preparing for future conflicts, which is very, very cool. No longer is this anymore. I do kind of miss it. Now, of course, base Dune Imperium was a very different game to what we played now, and that is mainly because of how you accrued victory points. Back with the base game, there aren't that many ways to score victory points, especially compare it to nowadays. The ways you would score victory points is, of course, hitting your faction spaces, winning conflicts, buying spice must flows, and, well, that was typically about it, really. Apart from a couple of intrigues to get hold of victory points, and, of course, a couple of cards in the deck that might give you victory points. Namely, you're looking at stuff like Opulence, wherever that is in this one. Here we are. Maybe stuff like Guild Ambassador as well. Other than that, it was really hard to get across victory points. So games would consistently go to sort of like round 8, maybe round 9. And as such, the issue you had for Ilban is that once you get hold of your Swordmaster and once you get hold of your High Council, your money a lot of the time just wasn't really doing anything, and it was not impossible to have games as Ilban where by the end of it you've got like 10, 15, 20 Solari just sitting in your bank account, just looking good but not actually performing anything on the board. Now you could say, well, Shadow, you could definitely hit Rally Troops, and yes you could, but Rally Troops was kind of a slow space and struggled from timing. Mentat obviously was always a good option, but the thing is not only did you have issues of where your money was going, so does the entire table. Everyone started to find situations where, like, you'd have a board with 2, sometimes 3 people with, like, over 10 Solari, just nothing to do with it, because you didn't have techs like flagships and all that sort of things, where you had places to put your money in order to do things with it. It just didn't exist. The other issue for Count Ilban is that his ability to get hold of the extra money just simply wasn't that special, because there was quite a few ways to generate money on this board. The Emperor spaces, as it turned out, were fairly effective, and getting those bumps for this alliance was not bad. But I think a particular problem that Ilban had specifically was securing contract. This is a place on the original Charm board where you literally just go there and get free money. That's it. And you could send that with, obviously, your ring. You could send that with your old Dune Desert Planet cards. Man, look at this. When was the last time some of you guys saw this card? It's been a while, right? But even just sending what is kind of a pretty bad card and just going to secure contract and you pick up free money, that's it. It's great. And all of a sudden, like, okay, I could send my ring to Ilban and change 3 to 4. But what difference does that really make in the long grand scheme of things? Not a particular difference. The other issue, of course, you've got as well is that doesn't even help you, say, getting hold of Swordmaster immediately, because, of course, if you want to do that, you just go to Great Flat, and then you sell the melange here for your free spice, and then you just rocket the Swordmaster and job sorted. So it didn't even perform that much of a bonus. And when you compare this to a lot of the abilities for the other leaders, Duke Leto chasing alliances, Beast with his brutality, Harkonnen's ring, especially Helena's infiltrating back in base Doom, when no one else had any way to infiltrate spaces. Helena was the only person that could do this. Unfortunately, Ilban just didn't really feel that strong and was generally left out of a lot of games, which was kind of sad. So let's fast forward to the Rise of Ix expansion, and Ilban also wasn't really the best for this either. Once again, his manufacturing and negotiability did have some kind of interesting uses, but Ix was a shipping game, and as such, leaders that could just simply get to these spaces faster and hit them more often were just better than the card drawers. Unfortunately, Rise of Ix was a real tough time for anyone that's a card drawer, be it Ilban, Paul Atreides especially, Memnon, Ariana. All these leaders really did struggle a lot. Icans could have some interesting niches, but usually any kind of successful strategy almost involved some kind of shipping in some form or another. So Ilban's strength just simply didn't play into this. His money did have some extra uses, of course. Now that we're getting into the expansions, we get access to the techs. And as such, the money definitely does have some use in these. The main one, of course, being flagships. There it is. Had to find it eventually. And of course, this allowed him to use the money that he would build up in order to, in the late game, look to make a push into conflicts against some pretty terrifying leaders, and it was some handy backup. The problem was, of course, getting hold of the 8 spice is pretty difficult, especially if, you know, you're not shipping. And of course, his money also is being used early on for Swordmaster, High Council, this sort of thing. Of course, the other big change for the for Ilban is that the board itself has changed significantly. The Landsrand has reduced in size, just High Council, Swordmaster, and the Mentat spot, and that's all there was. No more rally troops, so less place for him to go. And you could say, well, hold on a second, isn't there now the Dreadnought space, which is somewhere else he can buy stuff? And you are correct. And there were some interesting Ilban builds with going Dreadnoughts early and looking to use those on the map, but these were pretty risky, pretty niche, and I think it was more just trying to paper over the cracks rather than like a newfound life for Count Ilban, sadly. But it did have some interesting uses for sure. I think the two major downsides that Ilban found in Rise of Ix was because shipping existed, there was masses of ways to get hold of money in this game. So his ability to just generate money passively with his ring. One Solari, when people are shipping and cashing in and getting hold of 5 or 6 Solari is just absolutely nothing. The other issue for Ilban as well is there was just simply more ways to make money now. You don't just include shipping. You know, you think of cards like, say, Charm Delegate, which you could definitely reveal and get hold of free coins that way for doing absolutely nothing. Other cards as well would give you abilities to ship. You know, you think of like Landing Right, Shuttle Fleet. So again, just further marginalizing his abilities. Admittedly, there was a couple of cards that did help Ilban. A good example of that would be Appropriate. This was a very good card for Ilban. Probably one of his best in the Rise of Ix expansion, allowing him to use his money to actually just buy text directly. And was a very big card if Ilban get hold of. But over a course of 100 cards, it's not really probably enough. So then Immortality hit, and the game completely changed for Count Ilban. The main reason that Negotiator was a pretty good ability was to be able to get hold of the extra card draw. Now, typically in the past, this was generally just used to buy Spice Must Flows, which can definitely be an effective strategy, but you're always vulnerable to a bit of variance. You don't know quite what you're going to draw in what order, and that was going to be an issue. And the problem is that that's all well and good to getting hold of a point, but there's so many more ways for people to get hold of points, challenge alliances, and such that the pace of the game was just so quick that Ilban just wasn't getting a lot of benefit for this. But things have changed now with Immortality. Suddenly, the ability to just draw more cards and have bigger hands for using and reveal has a completely different meaning now, and there are two reasons. As far as your base deck is concerned, experimentation has made a huge difference. Being able to use more experimentations and just finding more experimentations to build up the specimens to target cards in the Talaxu row, maybe making a push on the Talaxu Beetle track here, both which are definitely very advantageous. But I think what has been a massive boom to Ilban is the action economy and action compression, and grafting has had a lot to do with this. Being able to just simply have bigger hands gives you more options, and the more cards that you've got with grafting that have agent actions, you can send. Even just something as basic as being able to get hold of chair dog experimentation is not that bad. You know, you'd be able to get hold of the brief search bump on this list, and then you're building up the specimen, and you can use this to target all manner of things. And was a nice way of trying to get hold of some of these very, very juicy benefits at the end. But I think what it is basic now for Ilban is just simply a case of being able to draw just absolutely buckets of coins. Because gameplay has kind of decentralized, some people are going shipping, some people are going kind of water research heavy, some people are maybe going faction heavy, is that there's not a lot of conflict for the Mentat space. It's just simply kind of sitting there a lot of the time. And it's something that Ilban has been able to target fairly successfully. And Mentat is just such a great space for Ilban. You know, for 2 Solari, you can go there with, obviously, you've got your 5 cards, and you can draw that. You can go there with, like, your dagger, pay 2, draw 2 more. It's great for deck cycling. If you've got cards that have got very, very strong reveals, like, I don't know, say the Talaxu Master or Negotiate Withdrawal, anything that's a free persuasion reveal, Lady Jessica, you've got the Imperium Ceremony card as well, and there's a lot of ways for him to get a lot out of these big reveals, of which there are quite a few now available in the game. Even stuff like Peddler for getting hold of water, Gildacord got that alliance, cards like Dissecting Kit who just generate you beetles on the side are just absolutely crazy, and as such getting big reveals with influence bumps as well, spice, pheromone bonds for water. There's just so many examples of cards that you can just literally reveal and you're getting huge value from. The use of the Mentat has become a very big part of Ilban's play as well, as even if you're not buying Spiceless Flows, you can still use it to target, to improve your hand pretty significantly, fasten other players, and then look to exert that pressure later on. Take this Imperium Row here, for example. Lots and lots of nice cards here, all with really, really good effects, and we can make use of pretty much any of these, but of course we've drawn a pretty terrible hand here. Now, I could go maybe to, like, Reconnaissance, you know, get some troops into the conflict. The problem is I'm only drawing 1 card. It could be anything. I might not be too much here, but being able to hit Mentat with, like, one of our daggers, which is not a very good card, suddenly turns what is a pretty bad card into one we're getting great use out of. We're turning this dagger into basically 2 or maybe even 3 persuasion, and suddenly all these cards in a row are very, very gettable indeed. This doesn't even take into account if I've already got hold of High Council, maybe even just going to Tech Negotiation to get hold of something here if I've got some spice behind me, you know, and he's able to get great use out of a card which otherwise is not doing a whole lot in your hand. And of course, the same thing again, even if you're not really using your daggers, maybe you've got artillery in your deck or whatever else, you can, of course, just use your Signet Ring to go there. And all of a sudden, not only are you drawing 2 cards when you normally get 1, but you're drawing 2 cards for 1 Solari. An absolute bargain. And you think of the power that this gets you to buy some of these decent cards, and again, you're deck cycling faster, so you're seeing these better cards sooner, more often for you to use. Combine it with, like, grafting abilities, maybe opulence, get some victory points, you know, throwing politics, just revealing, getting passive Bene Gesserit bumps. It makes it an absolute hassle. And these are things that ultimately, once you get going, can be really hard for anyone to try and control anymore. Now you combine that with all the other benefits we mentioned about actual economy in the previous video, which is why I wanted to do the Swordmaster one first, and you can see why Count Ilban become a very, very fearsome presence on the game. And again, once he gets rolling, he can be near impossible to stop, just printing Spicer Slows pretty much every single round, and still having the ability to exert control over factions, fighting over rewards in combat, making pushes on the research board, and it can get very ugly very, very quickly. So, of course, the question is, if this is a situation you've got occurring, and you need to stop Ilban, well, how do you stop him? There's one very obvious answer, but unfortunately, it's never quite as obvious as it seems, and that is revolving around the Mentat. As mentioned, because of the way Ilban works, and Ruthless Negotiator, he wants to hit Mentat as often as humanly possible. Every time that he's hitting Mentat, he is getting great value out of this space, regardless of what he's using. Even if he's just using his basic ring, it's fine. But the thing is that the Mentat spot, especially for Ilban, is there are so many cards that he can get where he just gets insane value out of it. A lot of them are courtesy of the Talaxu row. Let's look at a few of them. Scientific Breakthrough. Getting some research done on the side. Of course, you get to the end of the track. You get to trash the card as a victory point. Awesome. Let's look at some more, shall we? Industrial Espionage is not a bad card for him. If he can get this grafted with something else, he's getting tons of bonus. Research, specimens, card draw can be pretty good. Other cards, Slick Farmer, if he can get this to with like some false base something, he's getting extra money, which is paying for more Mentats, which is paying for Beetle Bumps, already good. Of course, there's some real sickeners here as well. Subject X137, just go there, get a Beetle Bump. It's not too difficult to really get to the second half of the research track, and him just sitting here getting a bump for 2 Solari and 2 card draw is insane. Twisted Mentat. Not only are you taking the Mentat, but returning your original agent, so giving you 5 actions in a round instead of 3, can be basically uncontrollable if you can get the card draw to supplement that. And of course, we can't go anywhere without talking about Pie to the Genius Advisor. Lose a troop, and 2 Solari for Ilban to draw 4 cards and research. Complete madness. You can get to points where Ilban is cycling a deck of 10, 12, 14 cards in a single round, and it just goes completely off the wall. But of course, it's not just the Talaxia as well. There's plenty of bad offenders in the basic row as well. So this is far from an exhaustive list, but just to name a few here from the row. Keys to Power. Spend 2 Solari to draw 2 cards and get 2 Spice when you've got the Emperor Influence. Ilban is definitely going to be getting hold of the Emperor Influence, hitting wealth to obviously pay for Mentat and get the train going. So this is a card he's going to get activated fairly quickly. For Humanity. Pay 2 Solari for 2 cards and a wild influence bump. Complete madness. We can go further down. The old Sardaukar Legion. 2 troops can be pretty versatile. Shifting allegiances can be okay, of course needs the spice to pay for it, but that can be a real hassle. High priority travel, draw 3 cards instead of 2 for 2 Solari. Absolute bonus. Of course you could deploy troops, but I think a lot of the time he's just going to draw cards. Manipulation, culling those bad cards out of your deck. Truthsayer, again, draw 2 cards. You don't like one of them? Put it away, draw again, have another chance. And you can just see how this list continues here. In the Shadows later on, draw 2 cards and discard one of them for an influence bump, basically of your choice. And you can just see how this just completely accelerates. Appropriate later on, so allowing it by text and all sorts of things. You will notice as well is that the vast majority of these cards I've talked about are cards that have come from the expansions, which I think also tells the story as well. The Mentat space has just become so much more versatile for Ilban because of the powers available to him nowadays. And I don't know if that's an accident, but I suspect it probably isn't. So when we talk about ways to counter the count, if you will, and how to stop Ilban from just completely doing this, well, there's one blatantly obvious answer, isn't it? And that is, well, just block the Mentat and don't let him go there. And again, yeah, Ruthless Negotiator is a really good space for him, and it's one he wants to hit all the time, but of course, it's not as simple as that. And at this point, I need to introduce to you the Prisoner's Dilemma. Now, I'm sure there's quite a few folks that have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, so allow me to explain. The Prisoner's Dilemma was a game theory that was first thought about back in the 50s, and what it involved is about having 2 separate people that are completely irrational, and the ways in that they can either choose to cooperate for mutual benefit or act independently for their own self-interest. It would be this man, Albert Tucker, who in 1950 formalized the game and introduced sort of a structure of rewards in the form of prison sentences, which is what kind of popularized it, as we know today, as the prisoner's dilemma. And then in 1993, a man called William Poundstone wrote a book on this called The Prisoner's Dilemma, giving a more contemporary version of this so that people could understand a lot more what was going on. So this is the prisoner's dilemma. Take two individuals, part of a gang, both are arrested on some kind of charge. They have no way to communicate with each other or send messages or anything. The police admit that they don't have enough evidence to convict the pair on the charge that they've got, and plan to sentence both of them to a year's prison sentence for a lesser charge. However, they both get offered the same deal. If they testify against their partner, they will go scot-free while the other person serves 3 years in jail. But of course, as always, there is a trick here. If both prisoners testify against each other, they'll both get indicted and are both going to serve 2 years in jail. So the question is, what will they do? And of course, there are effectively 3 or 4 different outcomes. If both of them stay silent, they both just get a year in prison. But the temptation of being able to sling the other under the bus and walk away scot-free is a very, very powerful driver. But of course, if they both decide to betray each other, they're both screwed. And what this is exploring is the fact that even though if they mutually cooperate with each other without actually being able to communicate that, the benefit for that is significant, that there's only 2 years served between them, the ability to be able to try and betray them for their own self-gain is ultimately a lot of the time going to tempt the person in order to make the deal and betray their partner, and as such, when they both end up doing it looking for the same reason, they both get penalized. The important thing for this is that one person has no idea what the other person's going to do. They've got no way to communicate or have any kind of clues in the details. They've simply got to trust that the other person is going to help each other. And we've seen this in game shows. We've had this before. And funny enough, I think this is actually something we've also seen in Dune Imperium, because at this point you might be wondering, what in the hell has this got to do with the game we're playing? Well, I think we've already seen examples of this. So while this is a hypothetical situation, I'm sure you've all seen something like this before. So let's say you've got this game state, it's round 4, and we've got Baron Cohen in second position, who is currently leading. He went Hardy Warriors in the first round to take the skirmish point, and obviously got his master stroke abilities so he could get hold of shipping, and as such used the advantage in order to get hold of both the spacing and Fremen alliances. And the other players have been kind of non-committal with their influence bumps. Not that they haven't been taking them, but they've just kind of not been particularly aggressive in them. And now you've got this situation where the Baron has a pretty clear, overwhelming lead, and if no one does anything about it, he's probably just going to go ahead and win the game. This was not an uncommon sight to see in the Rise of Ix, especially with some of the tournaments. Think back to the original Art of Fishery tournament, this came up quite a lot. So the reason I bring up the prisoner's dilemma is because you can actually take the basic concept of prison sentences and actually bring it to Dune Imperium. The 3 players here all have kind of the similar situation. At the moment, they're a long way behind, and if none of them really do anything to deal with the Baron, he's just going to go ahead and win this game more often than not. He's got 2 alliances currently, which can definitely be targeted, but it's going to take some concerted effort from Helena for the spacing, or Pel Atreides from the Fremen in order to go and take those. But the problem, of course, is that while they all recognize that the Baron's got to be stopped, if, like, Helena spends a lot of effort going for the spacing alliance, that effort she's doing great to try and take this alliance here, but it's not exactly helping her game at the moment, isn't it? And so what ends up happening is all the players recognize what needs to be done, but everyone waits for someone else to actually do it, because going for it is not really helping their own game. Maybe Paul Atreides doesn't really have any troops in his garrison, so hitting these Fremen spots aren't really doing a lot for him. And other people are fighting combats instead, and it's really hard for him, especially playing the game. It could be a real hassle. Helena, again, like, she could hit forward space and just try and jam this alliance, but it's such a passive move in the mid-game. No one wants to be going there if they can help it, and she's struggling for shipping access otherwise, because the Baron's already got there. And as such, Ilban, I suppose, could take the Emperor Alliance away from the Baron, and that gives him a point, but it's not exactly slowing the Baron down, because he doesn't care about this alliance. Like, he's perfectly happy. He's got these 2, he's just going to pick up his secrets point, maybe pick up another combat, start getting his Talaxu point rocking and rolling, and he's just going to sit back, get some intrigues, and just win the game. So the Baron isn't really forced to do anything. And we see this happen a lot, especially in the Rise of Ix Storm. This happened quite a bit with the Baron, where he just gets so far ahead, everyone waits for someone else to slow him down on their behalf, And then, of course, no one does anything, and the Baron just romps away to victory. So let's turn the tables a little bit here. Let's say it's round 6, slightly different reality, but the play is still the same. So now it's Baron to go first here in this situation, and as such, that means Ilban here is in 4th place. Now, he's been using Mentat very heavily in order to try and force an advantage. He's already bought a Spicer's Flow. He's got his Talaxu bump. He's threatening the second one here as well, looking very dangerous. He's got a point to pick up here as well. And he just finds one other loose point from an intrigue or anything like that, and then the game's just going to be his. So again, the players can kind of see that Ilban is proving very, very dangerous here. And again, his use of Mentat has been really powerful. He's got cards like Piter, banning Talaxu Research, that sort of thing has been really, really dangerous. But there's a problem. Let's go through the turns, shall we? So let's say we got Baron in first position here. Well, his issue is that he's doing all right for himself, but he hasn't gone Bene Gesserit yet. He needs to pick up the points. He's got 2 alliances. They're pretty safe. And he's got shipping and catching, because, of course, if he doesn't go there, well, Helena's going there and is going to go shipping instead. So he's going to go ahead with his shipping. He's going to go up and down. He's going to get his Bene Gesserit bump. He's going to get his spice, and he's going to get his troops and all that lovely good stuff, and rock and roll from there. So he's hoping, well, he's like, well, not my problem. Let's go to Paul Atreides. So Paul Atreides could go Mentat as well. But the problem is that he's running a low on action economy, which isn't ideal for him. Also, he needs to get the research station desperately, because he is very close to getting his Talaxu point. He's behind a little bit in the game here, and he needs to get there before Helena does, because, of course, Helena's got 2 water, and if he doesn't go there, well, Helena's just going to go there instead, and he's not going to make access, and he needs to make sure he gets there now. So he's like, well, screw it. We're going to research station. We're going to draw some extra cards. We're going to get our research, get that Talaxu point, get ourselves competitive the game, and all that lovely good stuff here. Is that, well, okay, that might feel kind of forced. So now we get to Helena, and Helena could go to Mentat, but the problem is that she's fighting red for the Bene Gesserit alliance. So she's like, oh dear, I've kind of not got to let him get hold of that. If he's got access to it, I don't know, but I'm not taking that chance. And also, he's got the spice to go to selective breeding, which is an obvious place for him to go. So we're going to go selective breeding. We're going to go here, trash a card, draw stuff, get hold of intrigues, get a point and score, and you know, keep ourselves going. And all of a sudden, you've got 3 players that all could have blocked Mentat for Count Ilban, and no one does. And so Ilban's just like, okay, I'll just kind of go here and just draw some cards and keep doing what I'm doing. And this is the thing that kind of happens sometimes. This is the prisoner's dilemma in action in Dune Imperium, where everyone sees that someone needs to stop Ilban going Mentat because of the exceptional use he's been getting out of it. But every single person waits for someone else to do it further down the line. And then you get to Helena, and of course, she can't do it because she can't just give up this alliance. So Ilban, even though 3 people could block him, gets what he wants anyways. So again, this is kind of a dramatized version of events, and you're not going to see this happen all that often, but you get the idea what I'm doing here. And the thing is that no one wants to do any other action what they did, because, of course, if they go Mentat, they're all giving something up. Baron never gets the shipping. Paul never gets the research station. Helena risks the Bene Gesserit alliance. And so Ilban, for doing just completely nothing and just being there, is able to watch all these players kind of just focus on their own games, which means he just gets clean run of the table however he wants, wherever he wants to do it, and is able just to keep exercising the advantages that he's got, and it just spirals more and more out of control. And it's not anyone's fault. Like, I'm not going to blame Green for going shipping. I'm not going to blame Paul Atreides for going research station. You can't blame Helena for going to the Bene Gesserit. They're all justified in their own actions. But this is how these situations can develop. And it takes one person in some situations to say, no, we just can't allow Ilban to keep spamming this and just keep getting masses of influence and getting good cards and spiceless flows out there. Someone's going to make a stand. But the problem is people don't want to do that if it feels like it's going to be a detriment to their own game. And a lot of the time, that's what happens. It's not just a case of people getting tunnel vision, which can happen. And I do think one of the things and one of the tricks of this game of becoming a better player is managing to go from what you're seeing your actions are and how you're going to develop your own game to how what you do affects others, and kind of reading the state of the table. There's a couple of notable games of the Salt Throne tournament that have come up pretty recently that have got examples of this. We had a game on stream, in fact, in like my birthday stream, where there was a runaway Baron. This was, no, the stream before, I was playing as Paul in the yellow seat. We had a Baron in the green seat here that was threatening to just run away with the game with Talaxu Master, Steel Suits Manufacturer. So as Paul, I absolutely bombed the Fremen Alliance. I was like, this has got to be stopped, otherwise he just wins the game every single time. And I took the risk of completely running my own game just to single-handedly stop the Baron. And it only worked and came back to win the match. It was a great game. And there's other examples of this. I'm sure all of you who have played this game a bit have had a time of where a leader just got a big early advantage, and there were plenty of places where people could have tried to stop them, but no one bothered to. I do find it interesting that Ilban benefits from this specifically. He kind of flies under the radar. Even if it's like the worst kept secret on the table, that he's actually got the most potential to win. But people just focus on their own bits and pieces. I think it's really fascinating and a good insight into kind of how the human psyche works. And how even though it's in the table's collective interest to stop Ilban, that everyone just focuses on their own interests, and as such they don't get the optimal response out of the game. And they all lose. I think it's really, really fascinating stuff. So what am I suggesting you do? This is to show you that sometimes you can't just say, I'm just going to block Mentat, because you could definitely do that, but of course you've got to consider the ramifications. There's going to be times where a player in the front is able to kind of use the other three players and just play them off against each other and manipulate the table, and that's going to happen. But there's going to be occasions where you might recognize that, all right, okay, Ilban's at 7 points, maybe he's about to get to 8, but where's his 9th and 10th points coming from? It's looking kind of dicey, and so you might be able to take advantage of the situation, you know, and Helena might be able to find that Mentat play. If she knows that Ilban doesn't have the faction access, she's been keeping on the track, you know, the diplomacy's been played, the test humanity's been played, and it's just a load of random stuff there. She might be able to go to Mentat, make the block, and know that she can still get to the Bene Gesserit and secure that alliance more often than not. It requires a lot of attention to detail. It requires some brave, decisive play. And I guess sometimes just requires a bit of guts, because of course you don't want to be the one to go to Mentat here and Baron's like, oh, Ilban's just like, oh yeah, I've still got my Diplo, I'll be taking that alliance, and then suddenly you can't recover it, and it's an even worse situation than what it might have been. And now not only have you not got the alliance, Ilban's now also got it, and so you've got to do extra work to try and get in front of him, and it just cycles around continuously. So what it's about, I think, is if you do recognize that a leader is in front decisively, if you can make an impact on them, you've got to figure out how to tie that into your own strategy. This is why I bring up the Paul Atreides game, because I wasn't just going for the Baron in the spot here because I knew he was winning. And I didn't just go for the Fremen Alliance because I knew that was how to stop him. I was always thinking and talking to myself, right, okay, if I'm going to get this alliance, what am I going to get from visiting these spaces, and what am I going to do with them? And the idea was pretty simple. If we can monopolize water, that allows us to go to research stations, so I can buy spiceless flows. I can get better cards here. If I'm hitting water, because Baron had no water, he sacrificed his water with a Water of Life draw early, which meant he couldn't heal Hardy Warriors. So I know I can go Still Suits. I can completely restrict him from hitting here. He then has to go to Siege, in which case, by that point, I can then go to Hardy Warriors. I can completely shut him out of this alliance here. And suddenly his plan B is not looking too good. And that's what you got to think about, you know, if I'm going here, like, what combat am I going to target? Because I'm probably only going to get hold of one. Do I go hard now? Do I save them for later on in the game? These are decisions you've got to make. Don't just block for the sake of it. You've got to work out how you're going to factor it into your own game plan. Otherwise, you end up going down this route of just stopping people. You get no benefit, and you just help out everyone else on the table with no ability to kind of advance your own game. But sometimes you just got to make the leap of faith. If you think someone is that far in front and you just don't do anything, they're just going to win, well, you got to lose, you know? If I was playing as Paul Atreides and I went to this alliance and I went to shut him out and he had the Fremen bump, his bribery, he's got finesse, and he locks up anyways, well, then he was just going to win the game anyways, and there's not a lot we can really do about that. But if you don't dare venture, you're never going to gain. The other thing you've also got to consider doing with Ilban, and this is early in the game especially, is, of course, if he's going to go heavily Mentat spam, he still needs money to do so, and that doesn't come free. He's got to find that money from somewhere, be it from, obviously, passive stuff of shipping, which he's just going to accrue, be it from his ring, he's just going to accrue. But, of course, at the beginning of the game, no one has any cash. And so a very obvious move for Ilban's going to do early on is hitting Met Wealth, because this is going to allow him to get the money to start hitting Mentat and get the chain going. He can use his signet ring to get it cheap, so he gets hold of 2 coins. He spends the Mentat using his ring, so it only costs him 1. He's got 1 left. Then someone ships, gets him back up to 2 coins. He can hit Mentat again, and start basically cycling it. It also means that if he hits Wealth a lot, the Ilban can definitely challenge Emperor Alliance, and this is generally an alliance that, unless there's like a Tesia in the game, tends to go kind of under the radar as well. So it's a very nice one for Ilban just to hit loads, take it pretty cheaply. And in this situation, like, no one's really ever going to challenge him unless they pick up intrigues to specifically help, or stuff like power play, Grand Vision comes to the conflict. Other than that, though, he can feel pretty confident that he's going to have this alliance for the rest of the game. So instead of letting Ilban go there, maybe in this situation as Hyena, you recognize the danger, you're like, I'm just not going to allow it. And I go Wealth instead. Obviously, I'm picking up my point here with the Emperor, which is obviously good too. But by doing this, you're just shutting off Ilban and not allowing him any access to this really powerful space originally. And I think that's what you've got to do with Ilban. If you just let Ilban do what he wants, he will cause destruction on the table. I think to defeat Ilban, you've got to be proactive in your moves, almost as a table. And I'm not necessarily saying that you start sitting and say, all right, then, I'm going to, all right, so, let's say, so, Ilban, the Baron here is going to agree, we agree, Baron's going to go to Wealth, and I'm going to go to Secrets, because Ilban's got money, including on don't do this. This is not healthy, although there's strictly no rules against this, I suppose. Like, you're a jerk, and please don't do this. But sometimes you can kind of see these sort of things happening, and if you're willing to make that leap of faith, sometimes you'd be surprised, and you kind of like, you do this, and you're like kind of saying, Blue, I mean, there's probably a move you could take here. Maybe Blue does decide to make that move, and realizing that Ilban is so front hard. Again, it's in everyone's interest to stop Ilban, so if they can just come together just for a couple of moves and just put a hindrance on Ilban and slow him down, everyone benefits from the situation. Unfortunately, this is a lot more rare than we'd like, but that's the way it goes. Before we end the video, I want to make a quick mention to a couple of leaders that have some specific countering of Ilban, again, mainly revolving around the Mentat. We've talked about Leto already, and of course, Leto is a very good candidate. Leto's and Ilban's relationship at the table is very fascinating because, of course, they both really heavily want the Mentat. Ilban to draw loads of cards, and Leto because he just gets it for 1 Solari for a stall and a card draw on a bad card, which is great value. And so if you have these two in the game, you can expect them to be fighting very aggressively for Mentat. And it's needed, because ultimately, if one of them gets it like 2 or 3 times in the game, the other one gets 2 and 3 times in the game, no one's getting excessive advantage of the situation. But it's not just Leto as well. Of course, little Paul Atreides also gets a lot of good use out of the Mentat because he knows what he's going to draw into the next card. And this is really important for Paul, allowing him to chain moves, which other people can't do, being able to kind of keep in mind what's going on in the game, and just being really nice and flexible. Omni Kaz is also another good example of this as well. Not so much because he doesn't really get a particular benefit from hitting Mentat specifically, but his coordination ability in the early game. Being able to, if he's got 2 agents on board spaces, i.e. not factions, he can trash a card in play. So maybe if you're in this situation and Ilban's till act before you, maybe as Ix, it's early game, you make the point of going to Wealth, and the idea being that you look to go Wealth and Mentat, and then you send the Mentat to like somewhere else on the board space. If it's just like Imperial Basin or Hacker Base or whatever else, you're not getting exact benefit from those actions specifically, but what it's allowing you to do is start trashing your deck. That's basically useful for you later on. And again, it's just stalling Ilban out, and it's something that you can at least, even if not immediately get benefit from, over the course of time, that will help, especially when you start cutting Ilban out. So I hope that's a bit of food for thought for you guys of ways to deal with Ilban. I think realistically, if you're going to try and stop Ilban, you've got to do it early. I think you've got to be very proactive about the situation. He is definitely a leader with Ix and Immortality that if he does get going, by the time the table realizes he's got to be stopped, it's just too late. His deck is already too good. He's got too many options. He's got too many secured points, and he can just buy Spiceless Flow and just brute force the game, basically, and it's very hard for anyone to do anything about it. So, if you're that concerned about Ilban, maybe experiment with a couple of moves early. I mean, is it that big a deal in the first turn if instead of going to, say, Secrets, you go to Wealth? you know, it might not make a big difference to you. You might like the intrigues. But if it stops Ilban from going Wealth Mentat and start getting that train rolling already, it has a lot more benefit than you might realise. And just experiment with it a little bit. You know, you might find some interesting results, and you know, there's bound to be other strategies as well. I'm sure you guys will throw some in the comment sections with thoughts about this. But yeah, it's the fact that Ilban does have some really, like, a lot of his strength resolves around Mentat is why I never put him at the S tier. Because if players want to stop Ilban, they can 100% stop Ilban and make his life pretty damn miserable. That might not be able to the same said for the next thing we're going to be talking about, everyone's favourite Tessia Vernius, but that's for another time. Take care, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the video, found it interesting. If you like what we do, of course, you can follow us more on the channel. We've got a Discord, Patreon, all that lovely and good stuff. Take care, everyone. We'll talk about her next time.